So thank you, and my apologies. I do want to make an announcement that there is an overflow room for the people who are standing. That's the. I wanted to start the day with this slide. The gentleman on that slide is Jeff Bezos, our founder and CEO. But what he's got behind him is really what I wanted to stress on. He talks about align with the customer, win when the customer wins, win only when the customer wins. And that's really what it is all about at Amazon as well as Amazon Web Services. So we are going to spend all of today interacting with you, showcasing to you some of the things that we've done with other customers. But primarily we're going to try and interact with you and try and see how we can align with you to win along with you. Right? So that's primarily what our goal for today is.
Good morning.
Thank you. I'm humbled to be here and honored. I have a few really bright lights in my face, so I can't see the back of the room, but I've just walked around there, and so many people coming out, so many of you is willing to give up, a day of your life to come and listen to us. That's actually pretty amazing, pretty spectacular. So I'm really honored that you're willing to come out to here and listen to sort of my talk, but I think probably more importantly, the sort of breakout sessions that you get after that. The breakout sessions really go into detail, the kind of detail that you're looking for, depending on which breakout session you pick. But probably when you all look back at today, at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure that you will say that the highlight of the day was the customer panel. Now, after my presentation, it's actually the whole goal of my presentation is just to set up this panel so that these four esteemed gentlemen can actually, talk to you about their experiences and a bit honestly about their experience, about how they're using AWS, because I think that's where you will learn most. So my task in this sort of opening keynote is to talk to you a bit about what is the kind of state of AWS at this moment, how's the business going, talk a bit about transformations. So I like to believe that what we're seeing at the moment is that IT is rapidly being transformed by the rise of cloud computing. And given that Amazon is a pioneer in this area, I like to believe that the way that we're driving our business actually also drives the transformation of many other companies. So first talking a bit about where we are, talking a bit about what is it that drives this transformation? Why is this happening? I mean, why is this pickup of cloud computing and Amazon Web Services so huge? Why is it happening? And I'll keep the suspense until then. But after that, I'll be talking a bit about how are different companies using the Amazon Web Services and how is it transforming their business. So those are sort of the different things that I'll be touching on. And then later in the afternoon, I'll have this fireside chat with Vikram. And of course, I'll be answering questions from you folks, if you have some. But we'll also probably be looking a bit towards the future. Now, what are the kind of things that AWS is focusing on? And what are the kind of things that we at Amazon think, or at AWS think, are important? What are the important drivers in technology at this moment? We want to unleash your creativity, and we want you to pursue your dreams. Whether that is individual dreams or whether it's business dreams, on our platform, without any constraints, like there were in the old world. Now, let me start inviting the customer.
We evaluate all the different solutions out there, and we're very privileged to be rated very highly by some of these analysts. If you look at some of the responses they've given us over the last few years, it's actually quite flattering. In fact, as recently as October last year,
Minds in India. And I'm really honored that all of you choose to stay back and spend your entire day with us here today. We'll try to make sure that you get enough value of the day today, so that you can take it back and you can actually do something concrete with that. Right? Having said that, welcome to the AWS Summit, the second part of the session today. This track is the startup and developer track. How many of you are actually startups, working in a startup or developers? Now, let's talk about scale. Does anyone know which company this is? Sorry, I can't hear you. Exactly. Instagram. How many of you know Instagram? How many of you use Instagram? Great, awesome. A lot of your hands stayed up. Does anyone here know how they did it? They completely did it on top of Amazon Web Services. Sorry, no privacy there. So, Eric Rice, the author of New York Times, and he's a proponent of the lean startup. He said the cloud is like a fertilizer that creates startups, right? And he's one of the, Steve Blank is one of his mentors. He's a professor at Stanford, and he's also the author of a book called The 4 Steps to Everything. It's a great book. If you haven't read it, I strongly recommend that you borrow it from a friend on a Kindle and read it. He said, by the way, that Amazon Web Services is actually powering a whole generation of applications. Let's talk about what kind of applications are they powering. A whole generation of applications, including e-commerce, some of which we, some of the use cases we talked about in the panel in the morning today with Warner, gaming, social media, but also a lot of complex and applications that need high performance computing or parallel computing, like for example big data, serving ads, post-click, data processing, etc. And this is happening throughout the world, but also in India. And again, we saw, in the brief, we saw a roller deck in which we saw quotes from a lot of Indian customers. You might know some of these. Hungama and Ruba are pretty much using the same underlying technology platform that is helping a lot of other, big enterprises like Dropbox and Samsung.
On actually building your minimum viable product. Okay? You don't need to be wasting time on anything outside of building that product for your startup, for your customer base. So we're going to actually build a best practice architecture. Let me see if I can do that architecture here real quick. Yes. And that's because I don't have time to set up a database. I don't want to install a database. I like working inside a database, and I don't want to install it. I don't want to back it up. I don't want to patch it. So I'm going to use RDS. That was one of the very first services I used. And plus, because you're a startup, I guarantee you will delete some data one day that you feel like, oh gosh, I just deleted some data that's really important. With RDS, you can roll back. You can actually take a back-in-time restore up to like little 5-minute intervals. So I can say 2 weeks ago, I can say, restore my database exactly the way it looked, a week ago at 12:05. So it's good.
As I said, I'm an account manager with Amazon Web Services, and I take care of startups and developers. I help them to understand, evaluate AWS services, and help them scale on the platform. What we're going to have today is really a two-part session. I'm going to speak about how startups scale on AWS, and with some case study examples. And we're also going to have a couple of customers up on stage here talking about their experience with AWS. In the second part, we're also going to have a venture capitalist from Sequoia Capital up on stage talking through some of how their portfolio companies are using AWS and giving a perspective on how startups scale and how startups should scale. Let's begin here. So one of the questions that we are asked fairly frequently is that what use cases does AWS enable for startups? And one of the biggest use cases, frankly, is web applications. However, saying just web applications does not mean much today. You have to be really specific. So just to give you an example of the different things that AWS, that customers run on AWS, you have startups related to gaming, social media, digital media, including ad agencies, mobile applications, mobile ad networks, startups in education, startups that are building social learning platforms, doing online courses, and something that we're seeing more and more, big data and analytics. Now these are startups who have a lot of data themselves and are using AWS to churn and analyze the data. And also startups who are building applications who help other businesses to do analytics on AWS. So a number of different use cases. These are by no means, this is by no means a comprehensive list, just a sample set that I wanted to show to you guys. Before we proceed with some case study examples, I just wanted to reiterate what the key value propositions of AWS are. One, no upfront investment, low ongoing cost, the ability to be very agile and deliver your application to the market very, very quickly. the ability to focus on building features and applications for your customers and not having to focus on operations, and global reach, the ability to scale not only within your geography but all around the world. So these are some of the value propositions that AWS offers. Let's see how. So Nikhil, can you just tell us a bit about Blazor?
Hi. It's good to be back in Delhi. It's been almost 10 years since I've been here, and I used to work here at the Times of India earlier. I'd like to start with a couple of incidents which were kind of the driving factors why I chose to use AWS. The first one was a startup called bigdata.com. Have any of you heard of that or remember it? So it was a social networking portal. It was a Reliance venture, and we had a music service on Bigdata, which was a streaming music service. This was back in 2007. And in a streaming music service, you need to pay royalties for the content that you're streaming. And the revenue source is only advertising. So we needed an extremely cheap, very cost-effective streaming solution. The entire infrastructure had to be very, very low cost. And traditional infrastructure, though we had lots of it at Reliance, that was never a constraint, but we never could make the business case work. And we found that AWS, which had just launched in the same year 2007, was the only service which could offer that cost effectiveness. So in lean startup principles, when you talk about a minimum viable product, you also need to think about a minimum viable team and a most viable infrastructure. So AWS provides that most viable infrastructure. Right, so I think I just mentioned earlier that it's all not just about building a minimum viable product and taking it in stages, but also about finding the most viable team to build it. And thirdly, the most viable infrastructure, because the infrastructure can actually burn all your finances away, right? In practically hours if you're not careful with it. More importantly, I think you need to adapt to a new way of building applications. Earlier, we used to build the application in isolation and then distribute it or deploy it onto infrastructure. I think with cloud and for AWS in particular, that whole paradigm is changing or has already changed. So what we have always thought of while we build our applications is that we are bringing in application capabilities into our infrastructure capabilities into our applications. So they're like function calls and libraries today, right? So I think that's the biggest change and the biggest advantage that AWS offers you, that you can actually bake in infrastructure, you can actually bake in scalability into your application. So your application is not just aware of where it is going to be installed, it can actually create that infrastructure on the fly. And that's how we think. That's why we are able to support 8 large studios, building large games which can scale. Today, for example, we have a game which is Real Steel, built by Jump Games, which has about 30,000 daily users, daily active users. Each active user generates about 250 API calls in a single 10-minute period. So in a day, we are handling upwards of 5 million API calls for just one game, right? And there's just 2 of us. So, and we can sleep peacefully at night, right? That's because of auto scaling. That's because of the various different redundancies which are available. And I think that's the core that you need to really understand and adapt to and include into your development process and how you architect your solution.